He had it all planned, the impeccable suit, the passionate gaze and the promise of a yes that would make him the owner of $1 billion fortune. Alexander Miller was about to marry one of the most powerful women in the country. But there was just one problem. A fragile woman with torn clothes and a forgotten past appeared at the altar, and with a single sentence destroyed everything. Who was she? Why did Alexander reject her? And what was he hiding from his bride? Get ready for a story of betrayal, family secrets, and a dark plan about to be revealed. Stay with me until the end, because what happens after the cancelled wedding will leave you speechless. And before we get started, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you're enjoying this, let me know in the comments and make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely won't want to miss. The sun shone brightly over the opulent grounds of the Grand Solstice Hotel, a 5-star establishment perched on the edge of a shimmering lake. Guests dressed in their finest attire mingled glasses of champagne, clinking laughter echoing through the air. In the heart of this luxurious setting, Naomi Sinclair was preparing for what was supposed to be the most significant day of her life. Naomi stood before the mirror in her dressing room, the delicate fabric of her wedding gown flowing around her like a cloud. The dress, meticulously designed, hugged her curves in all the right places, cascading into a train that seemed to shimmer with every movement. Her dark skin glowed against the white satin, and her hair was styled in soft waves that framed her face perfectly. She took a deep breath, her heart racing in a mixture of excitement and nerves. "You look absolutely stunning, Naomi," her best friend Lisa said, adjusting the delicate silver necklace around Naomi's neck. "Alexander is going to be blown away." Naomi smiled, her heart fluttering at the thought of her fiancé, Alexander Miller. He was everything she had ever wanted. Charming, ambitious, and deeply understanding of her struggles as a successful black woman in the fashion industry. They had built a beautiful life together, and today was supposed to be the crowning moment of their love story. But there was a slight tremor in her chest, a nagging feeling that she couldn't quite shake off. Perhaps it was just pre-wedding jitters. After all, she had seen many brides torn between excitement and anxiety on their big day. As she slipped into her heels, the door swung open and Alexander entered the room, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of her. He wore a tailored suit that accentuated his tall frame, his dark hair perfectly styled. "Wow," he breathed, taking a step closer. "You look incredible, Naomi." "Thank you," she replied, her cheeks flushing at the compliment. "You clean up well yourself." He chuckled, but there was a hint of tension in his smile. "Just trying to keep up with you." Naomi reached out, placing her hand on his arm. "Are you okay? You seem a bit tense." Alexander hesitated for a moment, the smile faltering. "It's nothing, just the usual nerves, I suppose." She studied him, searching his eyes for any hidden truths. "We've talked about this, Alexander. If something is bothering you, you can tell me." He shook his head the moment, a vulnerability quickly masked by a charming smile. "I'm fine, just can't wait to make you my wife." Naomi's heart swelled at his words, and she leaned in to kiss him softly. "Me too." The ceremony was set to take place in the grand chapel of the hotel, adorned with lush flowers and elegantly draped fabric. As they made their way down the aisle, Naomi felt the weight of the moment enveloping her. Family and friends filled the pews, all eyes fixed on the couple. The soft strains of the string quartet played in the background, creating a magical atmosphere. But just as the priest began the ceremony, asking if anyone had any objections, a commotion erupted from the back of the chapel. Naomi turned to see a frail figure stumbling down the aisle, her grey hair disheveled and her clothing tattered. "Please, stop this wedding now," the woman cried, her voice trembling with emotion. Gasps filled the air as Naomi's heart raced, confusion washing over. Who was this woman? Alexander's face turned pale, his eyes wide with shock. "No, don't listen to her," he shouted, his voice rising in panic. Naomi felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced at the woman, who was now close enough to see the tears streaming down her face. "I'm Martha. I'm Alexander's mother." "What?" Naomi's voice came out as a whisper, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned to Alexander, searching for an explanation, but his expression was one of disbelief and fear. "She's lying," he insisted, stepping forward to confront the woman. "You don't know what you're talking about." Martha shook her head, her eyes pleading. "No, dear, it's true. He abandoned me years ago because he was ashamed of his roots. But I'm here to protect you, Naomi. He doesn't love you, he's only using you for your fortune." Naomi felt the world around her tilt, her carefully constructed reality shattering like glass. She turned back to Alexander, searching his eyes for the truth. "Is this true? Naomi, please, this is a setup." Alexander's voice was desperate, but the fear in his eyes told a different story. Martha stepped closer, her voice rising above the gasps of the crowd. "He has a plan, Naomi. He's only marrying you to gain control of your empire. The prenup he had you sign is a trap." "Stop it," Alexander shouted, his voice breaking. "You don't know what you're talking about." Naomi felt the walls closing in around her. She had built her life on trust, on love. And now this woman, his mother apparently, was tearing down everything she believed in. "Show me proof, Naomi," demanded her voice, firm but quaking inside. "If what you say is true, then show me." Martha's face softened, and she reached into her bag, pulling out a worn envelope filled with old photographs and documents. "I have letters, records of his past. He's hidden it all from you. Please just look." Naomi hesitated, the weight of the situation crashing over her. She looked at Alexander, who was now sweating, his confidence crumbling. He took a step towards her, desperation etched on his face. "Naomi, don't listen to her. She's a crazy old woman trying to ruin our wedding." But the words felt hollow. Naomi could see the flicker of fear in Alexander's eyes, a glimpse of the man he had tried so hard to conceal. Martha stepped closer, her voice low and filled with urgency. "I know this isn't easy, but you deserve to know the truth. Don't let him deceive you like he did me." Naomi looked between the two, her heart in turmoil. She could feel the eyes of the guests on her, the weight of their expectation pressing down like a heavy shroud. "I need to know, Alexander," she said, her voice wavering. "Is this true? Are you really using me?" He opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed to fail him. For a moment, silence reigned in the chapel, the tension palpable. Finally, he exhaled, his facade cracking. "Naomi, Before he could finish, Martha stepped forward, holding out the envelope. "Please, just take a look. You'll see the truth for yourself." Naomi's hands trembled as she reached for the envelope, her heart pounding. She could feel the weight of the moment, the gravity of the decisions that lay before her. As she opened it, the world around her faded, and all that remained was the choice she had to make. Would she believe the man she loved or confront the painful reality that had just been thrust upon her? Naomi stood in the dimly lit conference room, her heart racing as she gathered her thoughts. The room was filled with the hushed murmurs of board members, their anxious expressions reflecting the gravity of the situation. She could feel the weight of their gazes on her as she prepared to unveil the truth that would shatter Alexander's carefully constructed facade. The air was thick with tension, and the scent of polished wood and expensive cologne hung heavily around them. "Thank you all for coming at such short notice," she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I know this meeting seems sudden, but I believe it's crucial for the future of our company." She glanced at the door, half expecting Alexander to burst in a charming smile on his face, unaware that his world was about to crumble. As the murmurs quieted, Naomi took a deep breath. "I'm here to discuss our upcoming merger and the implications it has for our shareholders." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But first, I need to address a matter of utmost importance, one that affects not only our company, but also the integrity of our leadership." The board members exchanged puzzled looks, and Naomi pressed on, her conviction growing stronger with each word. "Alexander Miller, my fiancé and your CEO, has been acting in bad faith. He has concealed critical information that could jeopardize us all." A ripple of shock coursed through the room. Whispers filled the air as Naomi's gaze locked onto the door once more. "I have evidence of his deceit," she declared, pulling a neatly organized folder from her briefcase and placing it on the conference table. "These documents and emails reveal a scheme to transfer company assets without the board's knowledge or consent." "Are you sure about this?" Naomi asked. Richard, the CFO, his brow furrowed with concern. "This is a serious accusation." Naomi nodded, her resolve unshaken. I wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't certain. Alexander has manipulated both personal and professional relationships for his gain. He's been planning to take control of our company and its assets through a fraudulent prenup. As she spoke, she could see skepticism flicker in some of their eyes. "You're saying he's been lying to us this whole time?" asked Linda, the head of PR, disbelief etched across her face. "Yes," Naomi replied, her voice rising with passion. "He's been using me as a pawn in his game. I have proof that he's been in contact with an attorney regarding a prenup that would give him access to my shares upon our marriage. This isn't just about me, it's about our entire future." The board members leaned forward, their interest piqued. Naomi could see their minds racing, weighing the implications of her words. "If you look at these emails," she continued, flipping through the folder and handing them copies, "you'll find communications between Alexander and a lawyer, outlining his plan to secure control of our assets right after the wedding." Richard scanned the documents, his expression darkening. "This is damning," he muttered, glancing at the others. "Do we have any way of verifying this?" Naomi nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "Martha, Alexander's biological mother, can corroborate everything. She has been living in the shadows, and she can provide the backstory that connects all the dots." Before the board could respond, the door swung open, and Alexander strode in his confident demeanor, quickly shifting to confusion as he took in the tense atmosphere. "What's going on here?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "Naomi was just explaining her plans for the merger," Richard replied, his voice flat. "And we were reviewing some concerning documents." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "What documents?" he demanded, stepping further into the room as the palpable tension escalated. Naomi felt a surge of adrenaline as she faced him. "The documents that reveal your true intentions, Alexander, the ones proving you've been plotting against us all along." His expression darkened, and he took a step closer to Naomi, his voice low and threatening. "You shouldn't be doing this, Naomi. You're making a huge mistake." Naomi stood her ground, refusing to back down. "I'm not the one making the mistake. You are. You've lied to me and everyone else. You've tried to manipulate me into playing your game, and I won't be a part of it anymore." The tension in the room reached a boiling point, and the board members shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Naomi and Alexander. "You need to leave, Alexander," Linda said firmly, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes. "We need to discuss this matter without you present." Alexander's gaze flicked to each member of the board, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. "You can't be serious," he retorted, his voice rising. "You're going to take her word over mine." Naomi's heart raced as she recognized the desperation in his tone. "The evidence speaks for itself, Alexander. You've made your choice, and now you'll face the consequences." With a defiant look, she turned back to the board. "This is not just about personal betrayal. It's about the integrity of our company. You deserve to know the truth." Richard glanced at the other members, then back at Naomi. "We need to investigate this further. If what you're saying is true, we can't allow him to remain in a position of power." Alexander's face contorted with rage. "You're all making a terrible mistake. I built this company from the ground up. You'll regret this day." "Enough," Naomi shouted, her voice echoing through the room. "This isn't about you anymore. You've shown who you really are, and it's time for you to face the music." The board members exchanged looks of uncertainty and concern, but Naomi felt a sense of liberation wash over her. She had finally taken a stand, and there was no turning back now. "Get out, Alexander," Naomi said, her voice firm. "You're no longer welcome here." With one last glare, Alexander stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed ominously, a final punctuation on the tense confrontation. As the door closed, Naomi turned to the board members, her heart still racing. "We need to act quickly. I can't do this alone. I need your support." Richard nodded, his expression serious. "We'll need to hold an emergency meeting to discuss the next steps, but you have my vote, Naomi. We can't let this go unchecked." Naomi felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew this was just the beginning. The battle ahead would be fierce, but she had allies now, and she was ready to fight for her company, her integrity, and herself. Naomi stood in front of the expansive window of her penthouse office, the city sprawling beneath her like a living organism. The golden hour cast a warm hue across the skyscrapers, and she could almost convince herself that everything was perfect. But her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, and her heart felt heavy with the weight of betrayal. It was hard to reconcile, the man she had loved with the monster that Martha had revealed. "Naomi," came a voice from the door, pulling her from her reverie. It was her assistant Jessica, an eager young woman who had been with her since the inception of her fashion empire. "Are you ready for the meeting? The board members are waiting." Naomi took a deep breath, trying to summon a smile. "Yes, I'll be right there." As she walked towards the conference room, the sound of murmurs and laughter filtered through the air. A pang of anxiety knotted in her stomach. She was about to confront the very man she had trusted with her heart and her business. The boardroom was large and sleek, a testament to her success, with a long glass table at its center, surrounded by high-backed chairs. The members of the board were already seated, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. "Naomi," one of them called out, standing up as she entered. It was Richard, her right-hand man, and someone she had relied on for years. "We were just discussing the upcoming fashion week. I know you're under a lot of pressure, but—" She raised a hand to stop him, her heart racing. "I need to address something important first. Please, everyone, take your seats." The atmosphere shifted, a palpable tension filling the air as everyone settled down. Naomi could feel their eyes on her, waiting for her to speak. She cleared her throat, her gaze scanning the room until it landed on Alexander, who was leaning casually against the wall, a smirk playing on his lips. It infuriated her. How could he look so relaxed when everything was about to change? "Thank you for gathering on such short notice." She began, her voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. "I have some serious matters to discuss regarding our company's future and some recent revelations." "Revelations?" Alexander echoed, pushing off the wall and stepping forward, his tone laced with mock concern. "What kind of revelations?" "Naomi, you're not still upset about that crazy woman, are you?" With a sharp inhale, Naomi met his gaze, her resolve strengthening. "Actually, I am, because that crazy woman is your mother, and I have proof that you've been lying to me." Gasps echoed in the room, and Naomi could see Alexander's mask slip just for a moment. The smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of anger. "That's ridiculous. You shouldn't believe everything you hear from strangers." "Stranger or not, she has documents that prove your past." Naomi pressed on, her voice rising with determination. "Documents that show you forged your mother's signature to steal from her. You've been conning everyone, including me." The room buzzed with whispers, the board members exchanging shocked glances. "What are you talking about?" Richard finally asked, looking bewildered. Naomi took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I have emails, contracts and letters that show how Alexander manipulated his way into our lives. He has a plan to take control of this company and use it for his own gain." "Naomi, this is absurd!" Alexander interrupted, his voice growing louder. "You're making a huge mistake. I love you. I would never hurt you." "Love," she scoffed, feeling the bitterness rise in her throat. "Is that what you call this? Love is built on trust, and you've shattered that completely." "Enough," Richard's voice boomed as he slammed his palm on the table. "We can't have this kind of chaos. Naomi, if you have proof, present it, otherwise we need to move on with our agenda." Naomi's heart thumped loudly in her chest, but she had prepared for this moment. She pulled out her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she opened the files she had gathered over the past few days. "I'll show you everything," she declared, turning the screen towards the board members. As the emails and documents filled the screen, silence enveloped the room. The board members leaned in, their eyes widening as they processed the information. This is serious," one of the older members murmured, glancing at Alexander. "Naomi, you have to understand these are just misunderstandings," Alexander pleaded, his voice rising in desperation. "I can explain everything." "Explain?" Naomi shot back, her anger boiling over. "You think you can talk your way out of this? You've been playing us all for fools, and I won't let you get away with it." The tension in the room was palpable as the board members shifted uneasily. Richard's expression hardened. "We need to take this seriously. If what Naomi is saying is true, we may have to consider legal action." "Legal action?" Alexander spat, his indignation spilling over. "Do you really believe her over me? After everything we've built together? Naomi felt a mixture of triumph and dread wash over her. She had taken the first step in dismantling the web of lies, but the fallout was far from over. This isn't about choosing sides, Alexander. This is about the truth. Truth, he sneered. You think you know the truth? You've only heard one side of the story. Then let's hear your side, Naomi challenged, crossing her arms defiantly. I'm all ears. For a moment, Alexander hesitated, his confident facade faltering. The room was silent, all eyes on him, waiting for a response. You want to know the truth, fine, he finally said, his voice low. The truth is that I did what I had to do to survive. I had nothing, Naomi. I had to fight for my place in this world. And you thought that lying and stealing was the way to do it. Naomi shot back, her heart aching at the realization of who he truly was. Listen to me, Alexander continued, his tone shifting from anger to desperation. I never meant to. Hurt you, I thought if I could prove myself, you'd see I was worthy of you. But I didn't know how to tell you the truth without losing you. Naomi shook her head, tears pricking at her eyes. You lost me the moment you decided to build your life on lies. You betrayed not only me, but your own mother. How could you do that? I was ashamed, he confessed, his voice breaking. I was ashamed of where I came from. I thought if I could just get a taste of success, you'd love me more. I didn't want to be that kid anymore, but I've changed, Naomi. I'm not that person anymore. The board members exchanged glances, and Naomi felt a flicker of doubt. Could there be a chance for redemption? But as she looked into Alexander's eyes, she remembered Martha's pain, the years of rejection and betrayal. You don't get to rewrite your story just because it's convenient now, she said firmly, wiping away her tears. You need to face the consequences of your actions. Naomi, please, he implored, taking a step closer. Desperation etched on his face. I love you. I'll do anything to prove it. But her resolve was unyielding. Love isn't built on manipulation. It's built on honesty and trust, and you've destroyed any chance of that. The room was silent tension hanging thick, in the air. Naomi took a deep breath, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in Alexander's position. We need to protect our company from further harm. The board members looked at one, another nodding in agreement. Richard leaned forward, his expression serious. We will have to investigate these claims thoroughly. Until then, Alexander, you are suspended from any decision-making power. As the board members began to discuss the next steps, Naomi felt a sense of liberation wash over her. She had confronted the truth, and while the road ahead was uncertain, she was ready to face it head-on. The mask had finally slipped, and the real battle was just beginning. Naomi took a deep breath as she stood in front of the grand dining table, adorned with flickering candles and delicate floral arrangements. The room was dimly lit, creating an intimate yet charged atmosphere. She had invited Alexander under the guise of a romantic dinner, but in reality it was a meticulously planned trap. The sound of soft jazz played in the background, juxtaposing the tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. As she arranged the last of the silverware, her heart raced. She could almost hear the echo of her own thoughts reminding her of the stakes. This was not just about her. It was about exposing the man who had manipulated her trust, who had betrayed her in the most profound way. She glanced at the clock. It was almost time. The door swung open, and Alexander stepped in, his usual charismatic smile plastered on his face. He wore a tailored suit that accentuated his tall frame, but today it felt like a facade, a costume for the performance he was about to give. Naomi, you look absolutely stunning, he said, his voice smooth as silk. He approached her, leaning in to kiss her cheek, but she stepped back slightly, maintaining the distance she had carefully calculated. Thank you, Alexander. I wanted tonight to be special, she replied, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. Special, I like the sound of that. What do you have planned? He asked, his interest piqued. She gestured for him to take a seat. I thought we could have a quiet dinner, just the two of us, before we finalize our plans for the wedding. He chuckled, the sound warm and inviting, but Naomi could see the glint of suspicion in his eyes. I like the sound of that too. A private dinner before the big day. Very romantic. As they settled in, Naomi poured the wine, the deep crimson liquid swirling in the glasses, as she tried to keep her hands steady. She watched Alexander sip his drink, his eyes flickering with curiosity. "What's on your mind, Naomi?" he asked, breaking the silence that had enveloped them. "Just thinking about how far we've come and what it means for us," she said, her tone measured. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately." "Thinking is good," he replied, leaning forward slightly, his demeanor shifting. "What have you been thinking about?" Naomi took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "About trust, Alexander, about the people we surround ourselves with." "Trust, that's an interesting topic," he said, feigning nonchalance. "Why the sudden philosophical turn?" "Because sometimes trust can be misplaced," she shot back, her gaze locking onto his. "And sometimes the people we think we know best can turn out to be different." His expression hardened for a moment, and she noted the flicker of unease in his eyes. "What are you getting at?" She leaned back in her chair, feeling an adrenaline rush. "I've learned some things about you, Alexander, things that make me question everything." He scoffed, shaking his head slightly. "What do you mean, Naomi?" "Don't tell me you're believing that crazy woman's nonsense." "Crazy, you mean Martha?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You'd call your own mother crazy. She's not crazy. Alexander, she's been wronged. And now I know the truth about what you did to her." His face paled slightly, the color draining from his cheeks, as he stared at her, momentarily speechless. "You're believing her lies," he finally managed, his voice rising defensively. "Lies. What if they aren't lies?" Naomi pressed. "What if she's telling the truth about your past, about how you've manipulated people to get what you want?" He straightened up, a mask of indignation plastered on his face. "Tell you don't understand. I did what I had to do to survive, to build a life." "A life built on deceit and betrayal," Naomi retorted, her voice unwavering. "You think I want to marry someone who has no qualms about destroying others for their gain?" Alexander's expression shifted, his anger morphed into a desperate plea. "Naomi, please. You don't know what I've been through. I had to leave her behind to become someone. I thought you understood ambition." "Ambition is one thing, Alexander," she replied, her tone icy. "But using people for your own gain is another entirely. You've hurt too many people in your quest for power." The tension in the room thickened, echoing the unsaid truths hovering between them. Naomi could see the flicker of anger in his eyes, but beneath it she sensed fear, a fear of losing everything he had built. "Let's not pretend you're innocent in this either," he snapped back, his voice rising. "You're not exactly a Saint, Naomi. You've played your games too." "Games? This isn't a game, Alexander. I'm talking about real lives, real people," she shot back, feeling her heart race with a mix of anger and fear. "Then let's talk about it," he said, leaning back in his chair, a smirk creeping onto his lips. "What is it you think you know?" Naomi felt a jolt of determination surge through her. "I know about the documents you forged, the land you stole from your mother. I know that you're not the man you pretend to be." His face turned a shade paler, and for a moment a flicker of panic crossed his features. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he stammered, his voice losing its earlier bravado. "Oh, but I do. And I have proof," Naomi declared, her voice steady as she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder filled with documents and emails. "I have everything I need to expose you." He stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief, and for the first time Naomi saw the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. "You wouldn't dare," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Try me," she replied, her voice unwavering. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, the thrill of finally taking control. "Naomi, let's not do this. We can work it out. You don't have to go down this road," he pleaded, his demeanor shifting from anger to desperation. "I'm done working things out with you, Alexander. You've shown me who you really are," she said, her voice firm, "and I won't be a pawn in your game any longer." His expression hardened again, the mask of charm slipping away completely. "You think you can just walk away? You think you can destroy me and get away with it?" Naomi leaned forward, her eyes locked onto his. "I'm not afraid of you anymore. You've lost your power over me." With those words, she stood up, the weight of the moment crashing down on her. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming her life, her power. "I'll make sure everyone knows the truth," she said, her voice echoing with resolve. "And I won't stop until justice is served." As she turned to leave, she felt a strange mix of triumph and sorrow. She had loved him once, but that love had been built on a foundation of lies. Now it was time to build something new, something honest, something true. And with that thought, she stepped out of the dimly lit room, leaving Alexander behind, a man who had lost not just a fiancé, but the very essence of his humanity. Naomi stood in front of the ornate mirror in her penthouse, her heart racing as she adjusted the collar of her elegant blouse. The evening was supposed to be a romantic dinner with Alexander, a chance to restore the warmth that had been lost in the storm of revelations that had consumed their lives. She took a deep breath, trying to quell the anxiety swirling inside her. She knew this dinner was anything but ordinary. It was a carefully orchestrated trap meant to unveil the truth behind Alexander's deceit. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the skyline, and Naomi could hear the city buzzing with life outside. She glanced at her phone, her pulse quickening as she saw the time. Alexander would be arriving any moment now. She turned away from her reflection and walked towards the dining room, where the table was set for two, adorned with flickering candles and the finest china. But this wasn't just a dinner, it was a stage for a confrontation. As the doorbell rang, Naomi felt a surge of adrenaline. She opened the door, forcing a smile onto her face. Alexander stood there, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his charming demeanor intact. "Naomi," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "You look breathtaking." "Thank you, Alexander. Please come in," she replied, stepping aside to let him enter. As he walked past her, she caught a whiff of his cologne, a scent that had once brought her comfort, but now felt like a reminder of betrayal. "Is it too early for a toast?" he asked, moving toward the dining table where two crystal glasses sparkled under the candlelight. "Not at all," she said, her voice steady despite the tempest of emotions brewing inside her. She picked up the bottle of vintage wine she had selected, the same brand that had been served at their engagement party. "This is a special one. It's from the year we met." He smiled, his eyes glimmering with a mix of nostalgia and charm. "Perfect. A toast to us, then." As she poured the wine, Naomi felt a pang of sadness. This toast, once filled with promises and dreams, now felt heavy with the weight of deception. "To us," she echoed, clinking her glass against his, "and to new beginnings." "New beginnings," he mused, a hint of curiosity crossing his face. "What do you mean by that?" "Let's enjoy dinner first," she said, taking a sip of the wine. The rich flavors danced on her palate, but the pleasure was short-lived. "I thought it would be nice to reminisce about the past." "Of course," he replied, settling into his seat. "I love hearing about your journey. You are truly remarkable, Naomi." "Thank you," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "But I want to talk about your journey as well. I've been thinking a lot about where you come from, Alexander." His expression shifted, a flicker of unease flashing across his face. "What do you mean?" Naomi leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I mean your mother, Martha." His demeanor hardened, the warmth of the moment evaporating. "What about her? You know she's not just some crazy woman who showed up at our wedding." She pressed, her heart pounding. "She's your mother, and she has a story to tell." "I don't want to talk about her," he snapped, the edge in his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "She's a part of my past I'd rather forget." "Forget?" Naomi echoed, incredulous. "Alexander, she's the reason you are who you are today. You can't just erase her existence." He took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. "I've worked hard to build my life, Naomi. I had to leave that part behind to succeed. By stepping on others," she challenged, her resolve strengthening. "By betraying your own blood. Is this really how you want to spend our evening arguing?" He shot back, frustration lacing his voice. "No, Alexander. I want answers," she replied firmly. "I want to understand why you would go to such lengths to hide your past." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defensively. "I did what I had to do. This world is unforgiving, and I made choices to survive." "Choices that hurt people," she said softly, the sting of truth hanging in the air. "Like your mother." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "You don't know anything about my life. You don't understand the sacrifices I had to make." "Sacrifices? You're talking about abandoning the woman who raised you." Naomi said, her voice rising. She loved you and you turned your back on her. Enough, he thundered, slamming his hand on the table, making the glasses rattle. You think you know everything, don't you? But you don't. Then help me understand, she urged, her eyes locking onto his. Help me understand why you pretended to love me when all you wanted was my empire. For a moment, silence enveloped them, the tension palpable. Alexander's facade began to crack, and Naomi could see the turmoil churning beneath the surface. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Then how was it supposed to be? She asked, her heart aching for the man she once believed she knew. Was I just a means to an end? No, I loved you, Naomi, he insisted, desperation creeping into his tone. I thought I could change. I thought I could be better. Better, she scoffed, incredulous. By lying to me, by trying to destroy my company. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he admitted, his eyes filled with regret. But I was scared. I didn't want to lose you. Naomi shook her head, feeling the weight of his words. You've already lost me, Alexander. You chose to hide the truth, and now I'm left wondering what was real between us. He reached across the table, his hand trembling slightly as he grasped hers. Please, Naomi. I want to make this right. Just give me a chance. By what, telling me more lies, she said, pulling her hand away, the warmth of his touch now feeling like ice. I can't trust you anymore. What do you want from me? He pleaded, his voice raw with emotion. I want to fix this. I want to be the man you thought I was. Then start by being honest. She shot back, her resolve unwavering. Tell me everything, no more secrets. Alexander hesitated, his gaze dropping to the table. It's complicated. Complicated. Naomi echoed, her frustration boiling. Over. You've made it complicated by lying. Just tell me the truth. With a heavy sigh, he leaned back, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine. I'll tell you everything. But you have to promise to listen. I'm listening, she said, her heart racing as she braced herself for the truth. Years ago, my mother and I had a falling out. I was young and ashamed of our circumstances. He began, his voice shaky. When I got my first taste of success, I wanted to distance myself from that life. I thought if I could just make it big, I could leave all that behind. I thought I could be proud. Naomi's heart softened slightly, but she remained cautious. And in your pursuit of pride, you hurt the people who loved you. I know, he admitted, tears welling in his eyes. I didn't realize it until it was too late. I got so caught up in the ambition that I lost sight of what really mattered. Your mother mattered, Alexander. You can't just pretend she doesn't exist, she said, her voice gentle but firm. I realize that now, he confessed, his voice breaking. I've been a fool. I thought if I could just marry you, I'd have everything I wanted, but I never considered the cost. Naomi felt a mix of anger and compassion coursing through her. What you wanted was never worth the pain you caused. You need to face the consequences of your actions. I will, he promised, his eyes locking onto hers with a newfound determination. I'll make it right with my mother. I can't expect you to forgive me, but I want to try and fix this. Naomi searched his gaze for sincerity, her heart torn between love and betrayal. You'll have to prove that you mean it, Alexander. Actions speak louder than words. I will, he vowed, his voice steady. I'll do whatever it takes to make amends. Naomi nodded slowly, the weight of the moment settling around them. She wanted to believe him, but the road to redemption wouldn't be easy. Then you need to start by telling the truth to everyone, including the board. They deserve to know who you really are. I will, he promised again, his tone resolute. I'll face the music. As they sat in the dimly lit room, the flickering candlelight casting shadows on their faces, Naomi felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness. But she knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. It wouldn't be enough to simply say the right words Alexander would need to embody the change she needed to see. Let's take this one step at a time, she said softly. I can't promise anything, but I'm willing to see where this leads. Naomi stood in the dimly lit conference room, her heart pounding in her chest as she prepared for the unexpected confrontation that loomed ahead. The weight of the previous weeks bore down on her like a heavy cloak, filled with secret lies, and the desperate need to protect everything she had built. She glanced at the documents laid out on the polished mahogany table, contracts, emails, and evidence of betrayal that were now her weapons against Alexander. The door swung open, and Alexander strode in his confident demeanor, masking the undercurrents of tension that crackled in the air. He wore the same tailored suit that had once made her weak at the knees, but today it felt like a costume, a facade that could no longer hide the truth. "Naomi," he said smoothly, his voice steady, "you wanted to discuss something important." She forced a smile, her mind racing. "Yes, Alexander, I think it's time we address a few things." He raised an eyebrow, curiosity flickering across his chiseled features. "Is this about the wedding? I thought we agreed to postpone it for just a few weeks." Naomi took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Actually, it's about a lot more than that." She gestured toward the documents. "I've been doing some digging into you, into your past." His expression shifted, a flicker of defensiveness crossing his face. "What do you mean I thought we were past this, Naomi? You can't let that woman's words get to you." "She's not just that woman, Alexander. She's your mother. And she's not lying." Naomi's voice rose, the emotions she had kept bottled up bursting forth. "You abandoned her. You abandoned everything you were supposed to be." "Enough," he snapped, his voice echoing in the small room. "You don't know what you're talking about. She's a delusional old woman who wants to ruin my life." Naomi shook her head, her heart racing with a mix of anger and disappointment. "No, Alexander, you're the delusional one if you think you can keep running. From your past, I have proof that you've been lying to me. You've been lying to everyone." He stepped closer, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "What proof are you really going to let her manipulate you? You know what's at stake here." "What's at stake?" she retorted, her voice trembling with emotion. "Your greed, your ambition. It's not just about you anymore. You've hurt people, real people, including your mother." He scoffed, crossing his arms defensively. "She made her choices. I made mine. I don't owe her anything." Naomi felt her heart break a little more with each word he spoke. This man, who she had once believed was capable of love and compassion, was revealing himself to be something entirely different. "Alexander, this isn't just about her. It's about us. It's about what kind of person you want to be. You have a chance to make this right." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his handsome features. "You don't understand. If I let her back into my life, everything I've worked for could crumble. I can't afford to be weak." "Is that what you think this is? Weakness?" Naomi stepped closer, her voice softening. "It takes strength to confront your past, to face the truth. Running away from it only makes you weaker." He hesitated, the flicker of doubt crossing his face. "What do you want from me, Naomi? You want me to apologize to her? To what end? She's not the same woman I remember." "No," she said, her voice firm. "I want you to acknowledge her. I want you to take responsibility for your actions. If you can't do that, then I can't stand beside you." For the first time, she saw a crack in his armor. His expression softened, and a flicker of vulnerability appeared in his eyes. "What if I can't?" he whispered, the bravado fading. Naomi took a step back, her heart aching for the man she had thought she knew. "Then you need to ask yourself if you really want this life, this empire built on a foundation of lies." "I can't be part of that, Alexander." Silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating. The air felt heavy with unsaid words and broken dreams. Alexander's gaze shifted to the documents spread across the table, his mind racing as he processed her words. "Is this truly about the company?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Or is it about me?" "It's about you," she replied, her voice steady. "It's about who you are and who you want to become. I can't love a man who is ashamed of his past, who doesn't acknowledge where he came from." He stared at her, the realization washing over him like a cold wave. "You're saying that if I don't confront my past, I'll lose you?" "Yes." Her heart clenched at the thought, but she stood firm. "I can't marry someone who refuses to take responsibility for their actions. I won't be tied to a man who hides from the truth." Alexander ran a hand over his face, the weight of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. I don't know if I can do that." Naomi took a deep breath, her resolve unshaken. "Then you need to decide what matters more to you, this facade or a chance at redemption." The silence stretched, and Naomi could see the internal battle playing out in his mind. "What if I fail?" he finally asked, vulnerability seeping into his tone. "You won't know unless you try," she urged, her voice softening. "And even if you do fail, it doesn't mean it's the end. It means you're human." He looked deep into her eyes, searching for something, hope perhaps. "And if I lose everything," Naomi stepped closer, her heart aching for him, "then maybe it's time to rebuild. You can do it, Alexander, but you have to start with the truth. No more lies." He took a deep breath, wrestling with the enormity of her words. "And if I choose to face her, what then? Then you take the first step toward being the man you were meant to be," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "It won't be easy, but you won't be alone. You'll have me by your side as long as you're willing to fight for what's right." He nodded slowly, uncertainty still clouding his eyes. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." Naomi reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "You don't have to be ready, you just have to be willing to try. That's all I'm asking." For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of the world resting on their shoulders. Alexander seemed to be searching for the right words, but they remained unspoken. Finally he exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Okay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll try. I'll confront her." Naomi felt a rush of relief wash over her, mixed with hope. "That's all I can ask for." As they stood together in that quiet room, Naomi felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was fragile, but it was there, and it was enough to carry them both into the unknown. Naomi stood in front of the expansive glass window of her office, gazing out at the city below. The sun was setting, casting warm hues of orange and pink across the skyline, but her heart felt cold. The weight of the last few days pressed heavily on her shoulders, each revelation about Alexander twisting the knife deeper into her already wounded spirit. She turned away from the view and faced her desk, cluttered with documents and evidence she had painstakingly gathered with Martha's help. Each piece laid bare the man she thought she knew, the man she was about to marry. A deep sigh escaped her as she picked up a letter from the pile, its edges worn from being handled repeatedly. The words felt like poison on her tongue. "I will do whatever it takes to obtain her fortune." Suddenly, the door swung open, and Martha entered, her frail figure, a stark contrast to the luxurious surroundings. Despite her shabby attire, there was a fire in Martha's eyes that belied her appearance, a determination that resonated with Naomi's own turmoil. "Naomi," Martha began, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "We need to act now. The longer we wait, the more dangerous this becomes." Naomi nodded, her heart racing at the thought of confronting Alexander. "I know. I've been gathering more evidence, but I still can't shake the feeling that he's always one step ahead of us." Martha stepped closer, her gaze piercing. "He may be clever, but he underestimates us. He thinks he can manipulate everyone around him without consequence. We can't let him get away with this." A flicker of doubt crossed Naomi's mind. "But what if he finds out what we're doing? What if he turns the tables on us?" Martha reached out, placing a gentle hand on Naomi's arm. "You're stronger than you think. You've built an empire from nothing. This is just another challenge to overcome. Remember, the truth is on our side." Naomi took a deep breath, the resolve in Martha's voice invigorating her. "You're right. I can't let fear dictate my actions. He needs to be exposed, and I'm the one who can do it." "Good," Martha said, a smile breaking through her somber demeanor. "But we need to be smart about this. We can't confront him until we have everything in place." Naomi moved to her desk, pulling out a folder filled with documents and emails she had decrypted from Alexander's accounts. "I found this." She handed the folder to Martha, who quickly flipped through the papers, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock. "Naomi, this is incredible," Martha exclaimed, her voice low with disbelief. "You've uncovered everything he's planning. This could destroy him." Naomi felt a rush of adrenaline. "We need to set up a meeting with the board. If we can present this evidence, they'll have no choice but to side with us." Martha nodded, her eyes gleaming with pride. "And that will give us the leverage we need to confront him. But we must be careful. His allies are everywhere. Then we'll play the game, Naomi replied with a steely determination. We'll make him think he's still in control while we gather the final pieces of the puzzle. Later that evening, as the city lights began to twinkle like stars, Naomi sat at her dining table, the atmosphere heavy with tension. She had invited Alexander for a private dinner, a ruse to keep him off guard. She wanted to watch him to see if he would slip, revealing any hint of the man she was beginning to believe was nothing more than a con artist. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts, and she took a moment to compose herself before answering. When she opened the door, Alexander stood there, his charming smile in place, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Naomi." "Ta, darling," he exclaimed, stepping inside and drawing her into an embrace. "You look stunning tonight." "Thank you, Alexander," she replied, forcing a smile. "I thought we could have a quiet dinner to celebrate. Well, us. Sounds perfect," he said, his eyes glinting with excitement. "What's on the menu?" "Just a little something I whipped up," she responded, leading him to the dining room where a beautifully set table awaited. Flickering candles cast a soft glow, creating an intimate ambience. As they sat down, Naomi's heart raced. This was the moment she had been preparing for, and she needed to stay focused. "So, how was your day?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light. "Busy as always," he replied, picking at the food on his plate. "You know how it is. Deals to close, meetings to attend. But I wouldn't trade it for anything, especially not with you by my side." "Speaking of deals," Naomi began, watching his reaction closely, "I've been thinking a lot about our future together, about the company." His demeanor shifted slightly, and she could see the flicker of tension in his jaw. "Of course. It's our future. It's what we've worked for." "Exactly," she pressed, her heart pounding in her chest. "But I want to make sure we're both on the same page. I found some documents today, things that made me question everything." Alexander's smile faltered, a shadow crossing his face. "What do you mean?" "Documents about the company and its future," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You've been planning something, haven't you?" He leaned back in his chair, a calculating look in his eyes. "Naomi, you know how these things work. Plans change all the time in business. We can't control everything. But we can control our honesty." She shot back, her gaze unwavering. "I've seen the emails, Alexander. I know you've been in contact with that lawyer regarding the transfer of assets. You're planning to take everything from me." "Naomi, you're misunderstanding." "Am I?" She interrupted, her voice rising. "Because it feels like you're using me, using this wedding as a means to an end. I won't let you do that." "Wait, let's talk about this rationally," he said, his composure cracking. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," she said, her heart racing. "And I know you're hiding things from me. I found proof." The atmosphere in the room thickened, and for a moment they simply stared at each other, the tension palpable. She could see the gears turning in his mind, the realization that the game was changing. "Naomi," he said slowly, his voice low, "you don't want to go down this path. It could ruin us both." "Ruin us?" she echoed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You're the one who's already set the wheels in motion for that. You've been lying to me from the start." "Please," he said, desperation creeping into his tone. "Let's not make this worse. I can explain everything." "Explain what exactly?" she challenged, rising from her seat, her pulse racing. "How you've manipulated everyone, including me. How you think you can get away with all of this, and Naomi, I love you," he said, his voice suddenly earnest, as if he was grasping for something to hold on to. "I've always loved you." "No," she replied firmly, shaking her head. "This isn't love, this is a betrayal." She turned away from him, her heart breaking, as she faced the wall decorated with photos of their happiest moments together. Each image now felt like a lie, a reminder of the man who had deceived her. "Naomi," he said, rising from his chair and stepping toward her, but she held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Don't," she warned, her voice trembling. "You don't get to play the victim here, not after everything you've done. Please, let's talk this through," he pleaded, desperation evident in his eyes. "I can change. I'll make it right." Naomi turned back to him, her heart stealing in her chest. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore. You've already shown me who you really are." As she stared into his eyes, she saw the flicker of fear, the realization that he was losing control. But she also saw something deeper, an acknowledgement of the consequences that were about to unfold. "Naomi," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I thought—" "What?" She cut him off, her voice firm. "That you could manipulate me and everyone around you without repercussions, that you could destroy lives for your own gain." "I can fix this," he insisted, but she could hear the desperation creeping back into his tone. "No, you can't," she replied, her voice steady. "The time for fixing things is over. The truth is out, and I will make sure everyone knows it." As she stood there, the tension between them thick enough to slice Naomi, felt a surge of clarity. She was done being the pawn in his game. She had the evidence, the support of Martha, and now the strength to confront the truth head-on. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice resolute, "I'm going to the board. I'm going to expose you for who you are." "Naomi, please," he said, his voice rising in panic. "Don't do this." But Naomi stood in front of the large mahogany desk in Alexander's office, her heart racing as she rummaged through the drawers. The room was meticulously organized, a reflection of Alexander's nature. Everything had its place, and everything was controlled. But today she was determined to disrupt that control. She had spent the last few days piecing together the puzzle of his deceit, and every moment felt like a countdown to exposure. Come on," she muttered under her breath, pulling open the third drawer, her fingers trembling with anticipation. The faint scent of cedar mixed with the sharp tang of leather filled the air, but she barely noticed. All that mattered was finding something, anything, that would provide her with the leverage she needed. As she sifted through papers, her mind raced. Alexander had been so charming, so convincing, but now the facade felt like a mask slipping off. She recalled the way he had dismissed Martha, the contempt in his eyes, and the way he had manipulated her trust. It made her stomach churn. Suddenly, something caught her eye, a stack of documents bound together with a simple clip. She pulled them out and quickly flipped through the pages. Her heart sank as she recognized the terms, legal jargon interspersed with familiar names. This was it. This was the prenup that would give him everything. She needed to get out of this office, fast. Just as she was about to slip the documents into her bag, the door swung open. Naomi froze, her breath catching in her throat. Alexander strode in, his expression shifting from surprise to suspicion as he locked eyes with her. "What are you doing here, Naomi?" he asked, his voice low and controlled, but she could hear the undercurrent of anxiety. She quickly stuffed the documents back into the drawer and attempted to appear nonchalant. "Just checking on some paperwork," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You know me, always looking for ways to improve our business." He narrowed his eyes, stepping further into the room. "Really, because it looks like you were rummaging through my personal things." "Personal?" she echoed, feigning innocence. "This is our company. I thought transparency was important to you." He crossed his arms over his chest, the muscles of his biceps taut beneath his tailored shirt. "Transparency, is that what you call it? Because it seems to me like you're looking for something to use against me." Naomi felt her heartbeat quicken. "I'm not looking for anything except ways to strengthen our partnership," she insisted, her tone firm. "Maybe you should trust me more. Trust that's rich, coming from you, considering you've been meeting with my mother." His voice dripped with sarcasm. "You think I wouldn't find out?" She straightened, refusing to back down. "I met her because I care about you, Alexander. She has information you've hidden for years." "Information," he scoffed. "That woman is a delusional mess. She's just trying to tear us apart." Naomi shook her head, her resolve hardening. "No, she's trying to protect me from you. You don't understand what you're doing to both of us." "Do you really think you can turn this around on me?" he challenged, stepping closer. "You're playing a dangerous game, Naomi." "And what about you?" she shot back, her voice rising. "You're the one who has been playing with people's lives for your own gain." For a moment they stood in a tense silence, the air thick with unspoken accusations. She could see the flicker of something in his eyes. Was it fear, regret? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Enough," he said, his voice cold and firm. "You need to understand something. I will not let you ruin everything I've worked for." Worked for? Naomi laughed bitterly, her heart pounding. You mean everything you've stolen, the trust you've shattered? I won't let you get away with this. Alexander's expression hardened, and she could sense the walls he was erecting. You need to be careful. I have more power than you think. Power, she echoed, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. This isn't power, Alexander. This is manipulation, and it ends here. Is that a threat? He asked, his tone chilling. You're walking a fine line, Naomi. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment. No, it's a promise. I won't let you control me or anyone else ever again. As his gaze bore into hers, she could see the wheels turning in his mind. You think you can just walk away from this? He asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. I won't let you. Naomi felt a surge of determination. You don't get to decide that. I'm not afraid of you, Alexander. Not anymore. With that, she turned on her heel and strode toward the door, her heart pounding with adrenaline. She needed to regroup to think of a plan that didn't involve him. The stakes were too high, and she would not let him win. Once outside, she leaned against the cool wall of the hallway, her breath coming in quick bursts. The confrontation had left her rattled, but it also ignited a fire within her. She could not allow fear to dictate her choices, especially not now. She had to act. Naomi pulled out her phone and sent a quick message to Martha. I found something. Meet me tonight. As she walked away from the office, she felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. The battle lines had been drawn, and she was ready to fight. She would expose Alexander for who he truly was, and she would make sure that justice was served. The game was just beginning, and Naomi Sinclair was determined not to lose. Naomi sat at her sleek, glass-topped desk, the evening sun casting long shadows across the room. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that prickled at the back of her neck and set her heart racing. She had spent the last few days piecing together the puzzle that was Alexander, and now she felt as though she was standing on the precipice of something monumental. The documents Martha had provided lay spread out before her, like a map to a treasure hidden in the depths of Alexander's past. She leaned over the papers, her fingers tracing the lines of a contract that was deceptively simple but cloaked in layers of deceit. The prenup Alexander had insisted on was not just a safeguard for their assets. It was a weapon, a legal loophole designed to give him control over her company. The moment she said, I do, the realization sent a shiver down her spine. How could she have been so blind to his intentions, Naomi? A hesitant voice pulled her from her thoughts. It was Martha standing in the doorway with an air of vulnerability that belied her fierce spirit. Naomi looked up, her expression softening. I didn't hear you come in. I'm sorry to intrude. I just wanted to see how you were holding up, Martha said, stepping into the room. Her gaze fell on the spread of documents and her brow furrowed. You found something, didn't you? Naomi nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the truth. I did. This prenup, it's not just about protecting our assets. It's a trap, Martha. If I marry him, he gains access to everything. My company, my reputation, everything I've worked for. Martha's eyes widened in shock. He's been planning this all along, hasn't he? Using you as a pawn in his game. I can't believe I let him get this far, Naomi said, frustration bubbling to the surface. I thought I knew him. I thought he loved me. Love doesn't conspire to rob you of your life's work, Martha replied, her voice firm. You deserve better than this. Naomi stood up, pacing the small space between her desk and a window. I need to confront him. I need to know how deep this goes, but I can't do it alone. Then let's not do it alone, Martha said, her voice steady. We'll do this together. I'll help you dig into his past. He may have thought he could silence me, but I have a story to tell, and it's time he faced the consequences of his actions. Naomi stopped, meeting Martha's gaze. You really think we can take him down? Together we can do anything, Martha declared, a spark of determination igniting in her eyes. He may be charming, but charm can't mask the truth. We'll expose him for who he really is. We'll show everyone. Naomi felt a surge of hope. All right then, let's get to work. They began to sift through the documents, piecing together the timeline of Alexander's deceit. The more they uncovered, the more Naomi's resolve hardened. Each letter, each contract was a testament to a man who had manipulated his way into her heart, and now it was time to turn the tables. Days turned into nights as they delved deeper into Alexander's past. They discovered a hidden web of lies that connected to his childhood, stories of betrayal, and a hunger for power that had driven him to forsake his own mother. Naomi felt a mixture of anger and pity for the boy he once was, but that boy had become a man who had no qualms about destroying others to achieve his goals. One evening, as they sat surrounded by stacks of papers, Martha held up a faded photograph. "Look at this," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. It was a picture of a young Alexander, no older than 10, standing beside a woman who bore the marks of hardship and resilience. "This is his mother, isn't it?" Naomi nodded, her throat tightening. "He never spoke about her. I never thought to ask." "Because he wanted to bury that part of himself," Martha said. "But this is the man you're dealing with, a man who is willing to cut ties with his own blood for the sake of ambition." Naomi took a deep breath, her mind racing. "We need to confront him. We need him to see the truth. Maybe it'll awaken something in him. Or it might send him further into his darkness," Martha warned. "But he deserves to face his past just as you deserve to know the truth." Naomi agreed, and they devised a plan. They would invite Alexander over for dinner under the guise of reconciliation, a final attempt to salvage their relationship. But it would be a trap, a carefully orchestrated confrontation designed to expose him for the man he truly was. The night of the dinner arrived, and Naomi stood in her elegantly decorated dining room, her heart pounding with anticipation. The table was set with her finest china candles flickering softly in the dim light. She had dressed with purpose, wearing a deep red dress that hugged her curves, a reminder of the woman she was before Alexander had entered her life. She was not about to let him take that away from her. When the doorbell rang, she exchanged a quick glance with Martha, who offered her an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Naomi opened the door to find Alexander standing there, a charming smile plastered on his face. "Wow, you look stunning," he said, stepping inside. "Thank you," Naomi replied, her voice steady. "I wanted tonight to be special." Alexander's eyes sparkled with delight as he took in the setting. "You always go above and beyond. I've missed this." Naomi forced a smile, leading him to the dining table. "I thought we could use some time to talk, just the two of us." "Of course," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "What's on your mind?" As they settled in, Naomi kept her composure, but inside, her heart raced. "There are some things we need to address, Alexander, about our future and your past." "Is this about that woman?" he asked, his tone shifting slightly. "She's a nobody, Naomi. Don't let her get into your head." "She's not a nobody," Naomi said, her voice firm. "She's your mother, and she deserves to be acknowledged. You've hidden her for too long." For a moment, silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Alexander's expression hardened, a flicker of anger flashing in his eyes. "I don't want to discuss her. She's not part of my life anymore." "But she should be," Naomi pressed on. "You've built your life on lies, and it's time to face the truth. You can't keep running from who you are." "Who I am is irrelevant," he snapped, leaning forward. "What matters is what I've built, what I've accomplished. You should be proud to stand beside me, not questioning my past." Naomi's heart sank at his words. She realized that the man she loved was slipping away, replaced by someone she barely recognized. "I can't be proud of a man who hides from his own history. You've hurt people, Alexander. You've hurt me." His expression softened for a brief moment, and for the first time she saw a flicker of vulnerability. "Naomi, I didn't want you to see that side of me. I thought I could protect you from it." "You're not protecting me by lying," she said, feeling the tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "You're only hurting us both. This isn't just about you anymore." At that moment, Martha entered the room, her presence a quiet reminder of the truth that had been hidden for too long. "Alexander," she said, her voice steady, "it's time to face the consequences of your actions." Naomi watched as Alexander's face turned pale, the facade he had built crumbling before her eyes. The truth was finally closing in, and Naomi felt a surge of hope mixed with trepidation. Would he finally confront the monster he had become, or would he retreat into his darkness once more? Naomi stood at the head of the long, elegantly set dining table, the flickering candlelight casting soft shadows on her determined face. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a palpable anticipation hanging in the air. She had invited Alexander for a private and romantic dinner, a ruse that had drawn him in like a moth to a flame, unaware of the trap she had set. The dining room was adorned with fresh flowers, and the aroma of a gourmet meal wafted through the air, but none of it mattered now. The stage was set for a reckoning. As Alexander entered the room, his usual charm was overshadowed by a flicker of confusion as he noticed the unusual number of guests, members of the board, a few journalists, and most importantly, Martha, standing resolute in a corner. Her frail figure seemed to radiate strength, the shadows of her past now a source of power rather than shame. Naomi, noticing his momentary hesitation, allowed herself a small smile, her heart racing. The moment had finally arrived. "Surprise!" Naomi exclaimed, her voice bright with a hint of bravado. "I thought it was time for some real conversation." Alexander blinked, taking in the scene. "What is this, Naomi?" His voice was low, a mixture of confusion and irritation. "I thought we were having dinner alone." Naomi stepped closer, her posture confident, her gaze unwavering. "We are having dinner, Alexander, but not the way you think." She gestured to the guests who remained silent, their eyes fixed on him. "You see, I wanted to ensure that the truth came to light, and what better way than to have an audience?" "Truth?" He scoffed, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" "Let's not play games," she replied, her tone now steely. "We both know the truth, but it seems you've been very skilled at hiding it. I've gathered everyone here tonight to witness your unmasking." At that moment, Martha stepped forward, her frail hands clasped tightly together. "Alexander," she said, her voice trembling but steady, "it's time you face the consequences of your actions. You've built your empire on lies, and it's time those lies came crashing down." He turned to her, a mixture of anger and incredulity crossing his features. You think you can come in here and ruin everything? You're nobody, Martha. You never mattered to me." Martha's expression hardened. "I may be a nobody to you, but I'm still your mother, and it's time you remember that blood is thicker than ambition." Naomi seized the moment, stepping even closer to Alexander, her eyes blazing. "You've deceived everyone, Alexander. Your mother, your fiancée, everyone you've ever claimed to care about. You're not just a liar. You're a coward." "Coward?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you can take me down with your little gathering? I've outsmarted everyone in this room. You're making a mistake." Naomi shook her head. "No, Alexander. The mistake was trusting you to begin with. But I'm not the only one. Who deserves to know the truth? I have documents, emails, contracts, evidence of your manipulations." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "You're not the man I thought you were, and soon the world will know who you really are." The guests exchanged glances, some whispering among themselves, intrigued and shocked at the unfolding drama. Naomi continued, her voice steady and clear. "I have an email here sent from your account to your lawyer, outlining the steps you plan to take to seize control of my company. I have everything I need to expose you." Alexander's expression shifted from confidence to panic. "You wouldn't dare," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. "Oh, I would," Naomi replied, her heart racing with the thrill of the confrontation. "You see, Alexander, I've already contacted the media. They're waiting for the truth. You'll be front-page news, and not in the way you imagined. How you think you can intimidate me?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You're playing a dangerous game, Naomi." "I'm not afraid of you," she shot back, her resolve unwavering. "And neither is Martha. We're done being your pawns." Martha, emboldened by Naomi's strength, stepped forward again. "You've taken everything from me, Alexander. My dignity, my home, my relationship with my son. You've built your life on my suffering, but no more. We will not be silenced." The tension in the room crackled like electricity. Naomi turned to the guests, her voice ringing out with clarity. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're witnesses to this man's deception. Alexander Miller has turned love into a weapon, and it's Time for justice. He took a step back, the bravado fading from his eyes. "But you can't do this to me," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "Oh, but I can," Naomi said, a flicker of pity crossing her face for a moment. "You've made your choices, and now it's time to face the consequences. You may have thought you could outsmart everyone, but you underestimated the power of truth and the strength of a woman who's had enough." As she spoke, Naomi felt a wave of liberation wash over her. This was her moment, the culmination of all the pain and betrayal she had endured. She turned to Martha, who nodded in silent support. Together they had turned the tables on Alexander, reclaiming their stories and their lives. "Naomi," Alexander said, his voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. "Please, don't do this. I can change. I'll make it right." "Change," Naomi echoed, her voice steady. "You've had your chances, Alexander. It's too late for apologies. You've shown your true colors, and now everyone will see them too." The tension in the room reached its peak as Naomi's gaze held his, unyielding and resolute. "You've had your moment in the spotlight. Now it's time for you to face the music." With that, she turned to the guests, her voice ringing out with authority. "Thank you all for coming. I believe we've seen enough of the man behind the mask. Alexander Miller is no longer welcome here." As Naomi's words hung in the air, Alexander's face twisted with rage and shame. He turned to leave, his exit marked by a heavy silence. The guests exchanged glances, a mix of shock and admiration for Naomi's bravery. Martha stepped closer to Naomi, pride shining in her eyes. "You did it, my dear. You stood up to him." Naomi smiled, the weight on her shoulders lifting slightly. "We did it, Martha. Together. It's time to rebuild, to create something new from the ashes of this deception." And as the evening unfolded with the guests still buzzing from the revelation, Naomi knew that this was just the beginning. The truth had set her free, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next, armed with the strength of her past and the promise of a brighter future.